And I learned a lot about sandwich glass by visiting.
Uh-huh.
Invite you in for a cup of tea. I was not fond of tea. My favorite was coffee, but I would drink the tea. And I learned a lot about sandwich glass because it was loaded in each house.
Okay. And do you have any yourself these days?
I have two little pieces.
Now, I'm sure other than the post office, you were going to the
We went to the
shopping.
grocery store. Oh, yes.
And where did you?
There were, oh, you said Alfred Hoy was First National, and then we went to Russell's Market down at the corner. Alfred Hoy was a very fine gentleman, but it was great to go to the Russells on Russell's Corner. Mr. Russell was one of those whose son had gone in the service. And you would go in there and say, "We didn't get our checks yet." No problem. Just tell them when you get your order, put it on the slip, pay it when you can.
Mm.
And that's the way he was with every service person that went in there. And I can tell you, there were some people who did not pay their bills before they left, which was a very, very, to me, very sad thing. The man was willing to trust us for food, and some of us had little ones, some did not. He never asked for 1 cent. All he said was, if you didn't get your check, your allotment check, just tell him at the desk when you get your food and put it in the cash register.
Mm. And then, well.
He was one of the most kind people, but it was fun in a way when I think back of running from one store to the other store. First, one store would say, well, yeah, we only have so much, I'm using butter as an example, or sugar. We only have so much butter, so we can only take 15 people, and they'd count off 15 people. Okay, if you want to stay, you can still get in the store, but these people, 15, can have butter. The rest of you, I'm sorry, there is no more butter. Most of them stayed, including myself, if I wasn't one of the 15, because you got up early in the morning to be sure you were first in line.
Wow. So you stood in line outside the door?
Yes, you did.
Wow.
Then if you'd hear somebody come from Russell's Market about 7:30 in the morning and say, "Oh, guess what? Mr. Russell has Hamburg today." Well, if you weren't in waiting for butter, you ran down to Mr. Russell's store to get the Hamburg if he had any left when you got there, because he was only allotted so much.
Mm-hmm.
But it was kind of fun in a way. Nobody argued. I mean, it was just, well, we're too late. We can't get it. That's all.
So
But,
things were scarce during the war for
yes,
vital things of butter, sugar,
yes,
meats.
that's why when you heard the word, you ran to whatever store. And many times you were there at 7 o'clock, 6:30, 7 o'clock, if you were able to, standing at the doorstep.
Mm-hmm.
Because you never knew what they were going to get in, never.
Wow.
But it was fun. And when I look back now, running from one store to the other, even for a loaf of bread, certain bread you wanted.
Mm. And you were living now on Pleasant Street
Yes,
and had
I
your
was
own
then.
apartment.
Yes, I was.
Okay.
And it was so nice because we could walk to the library. You never had to worry about if you went at night and it was dark and there were very few street lights, you never had to worry. You could walk to the library, do your shopping of library books, and come home in the dark. Never had to worry.
Mm.
Never. For years that went on that way.
Mm. And you had children. Talk to me about the ration books that you used during that time and how that worked.
Well, you had to go to the town hall to get a ration book, and you got, I can't remember how much was in the book, but for the majority of groceries that you got from the store, no matter what it was, you had to use some of your stamps, so you were very, very careful what you picked up. If you picked up a can of peas, and that was, let's say, that counted for 4 stamps, you'd look at something that maybe was only 2 stamps. So then you could get twice as much if it was something you liked. And okay, I'll take that instead today because I don't want to spend 4 when I can get 2 for the price of the 4 that it would take my stamps. When I had my little one, even baby food was rationed. No matter what you got for babies was rationed. And so you had to be really very, very careful with that too. I was very happy when my little one got off of foods that I could cook myself and eat. But the men who ran the stores, you could not have asked for better gentlemen than Alfred Hoy and Billy Russell. They were the 2 most wonderful people, to me anyway.
Well, they must have been, because you're recalling this 60 years later, and
They were.
and you remember their names.
They were just wonderful. And after the war, Mr. Russell's son came home, and he was not in good condition at all. He had been through hell, really, in the war. And he tried to help his dad, and we all loved him anyway. They were just so wonderful. And then the 2 girls took over. Their 2, young Billy, his 2 daughters took over, and they were just as nice as the dad and the grandfather.
And that's why we call that place Russell's Corner today.
Russell's Corner. They were just unbelievable, unbelievable. At least to me, and I'm sure there were many others that felt the same way, that stayed in Sandwich.
Now, you stayed in Pleasant Street for how long, and where did you go after that?
We were probably in Pleasant Street about a year, probably a little over a year. Oh no, probably nearer 2 years. I think, can I talk about this? Because we had, in those days, you know, everybody had to fill a can that went on the back of the stove for heat. It was an oil stove, and it had a wick in it, and you had to be very careful about filling it. You didn't want to overflow because then you might have a fire. Well, that was all the heat we had in this little 3-room apartment, plus heating the bathroom and upstairs bedroom. That was all we had for heat. To cook on, I laugh today when I think back. I tell people and they look at me and say, "What are you talking about?" I had a kerosene stove with 3 burners, and I had an oven that fit on the kerosene 1 burner, and that's what I cooked with. And I was not a good cook because I had not learned a lot. My mother did all the cooking at home. And so I had to learn how to adjust these burners so that something didn't boil over or it did keep boiling. And I never got a new stove. The landlady, that was it. We did have a nice refrigerator. She let us have a nice electric refrigerator. That was something. And we had an ice box before that with Iceman coming. And it was so nice to have an electric refrigerator. I was in heaven when we had that. But this stove, and I had to do my wash in one of those good old, what do you call them, the sinks. They had a name, they were enormous. And that's where I washed my clothes.
A soapstone sink?
Yes. I had to wash dishes in there, and I had to be very careful because I had to wash my clothes also in that. And of course, a husband who had white uniforms for Coast Guard was not pleasant to wash in that sink and try to get those whites white and everything clean. But that's what we had to do, our washing, yes.
And how about the social activities? Did you go to any dances?
Oh, yes. I have to say, the Coast Guard was very nice. And once in a while, They would, I don't know exactly how it worked, but they would get together with, well, it wasn't Otis, it was what? What
Camp
was it?
Edwards?
What was it called?
Camp Edwards?
Camp Edwards, right. And they would get together with the Coast Guard, and they would have a dance, and it would be held at the Sandwich H.D. Wing School. And it was wonderful. They'd have a band, and if they couldn't get a band, we'd have music, canned music, as you do today. But they'd have things to eat. They would supply the refreshments, and no hard liquor. You had to have either cold drinks, coffee, tea, which was fine. But we'd get dressed up, and that was kind of a special occasion for us. Wives to have something like that and have our husbands be able. They tried to have it so that the majority could at least be there part of the time, even if they had to go back on duty, the men. But they didn't have many of those affairs, but they were very, very nice to go to for a big change.
And these were for the adults and not the teenagers?
No,
at the time,
this
huh?
was for the adults. You're right. Either all the men in the service could come, mostly the Coast Guard. Occasionally you would have, if a young girl had met someone over at Camp Edwards, no problem, but he could come also. They would come over. But it was fun, and we enjoyed each other's company. Now, I do have to tell you about the Sagamore Inn. Maybe people have told you before. Majority of us, you realize, did not have cars. And you know where you'd be at the corner of, I guess, let's see, that was the Yankee Clipper. I have to think back.
Jarvis.
Russell's Corner, all right?
Jarvis and Maine.
Okay.
Jarvis and Route 6. Yeah.
Majority of us, at least, some of them had to walk from the Coast Guard station to Sagamore Inn. But the husband and wife there opened their doors to the Coast Guard once a week. They had the, what do I want to say, you put in your nickels and quarters and those.
The jukebox.
Jukebox. So that we could dance, and they would always make sure there was a small area at the Sagamore Inn that you could get up and dance. Very hard because it was so crowded. They would feed us for free pizza. You had to buy your drinks, yes you did, but the pizza was free, and they made their own pizza. They grew their tomatoes out in their garden, and being Italian, I can tell you it was the best pizza. Everybody, till this day, will tell you it was the best pizza there ever was. And they were just wonderful to the Coast Guard, just wonderful.
And that's the same Sagamore Inn that is there today,
Yes,
the white
it is.
building.
Exact same. And you can imagine pushing chairs and tables around that place. It's not that big. And that was loaded with Coast Guard people. But everybody got along with everybody. It was just so nice.
That was a good long walk from
It was.
Connor.
But you'd go in maybe 4 or 5 in a group, 6 in a group. I mean, it wasn't too bad. And occasionally there was someone who had a car. Yes, there was. And they had enough gas so that you could pile in maybe 10, 12, sit on each other's laps. It was okay to get to the Sagamore Inn. But there were people were just so wonderful in Sandwich in those days. Not that they aren't today, don't misunderstand me. Sandwich has grown so much. But it was so nice to say I could myself say you knew about everyone in Sandwich, in the town of. And my son even remarks, he is 60, he's in his 60s. And he would remark, even every time he comes home to visit, about how the bus, when he was going to high school at H.G. Wing, the bus would go over to Forestdale and pick up 5 students because they had no way for transportation, and bring them back to H.G. Wing to go to school. And you look at Forestdale today.
That's where most of the people live.
That's right.
Wow. Wow. Now, you didn't have a car, but did you occasionally use the train service to go to Boston or other places?
Yes, we did. And we lived, both of us lived, like I said, on Long Island, and my husband in one town and myself in the next town. And yes, we did. We went on the train. We'd go to Grand Central Station, and then we had to change trains there or wait for a train to take us to Long Island. And that's the way we did it. Yes, we did.
And you took the train out of the
Sandwich.
present-day depot down there on Jarvis Street.
Sandwich. Yes, we did.
Wow.
Wish it was running today to go to Boston.
Had you taken it up to Boston back in the 50s?
Yes, yes, we did.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, what else do you want me, what else would you like to talk about from that particular time?
Well, I guess that's about it. Like I say, I just made so many friends that when my husband was taken sick, and he died of cancer, and the last 3 weeks were horrible. And he stayed at home. I took care of him. But everyone calling on the phone, could they help? What could they do? It was just I don't know how to explain it. It was just wonderful, just wonderful. And I've met so many more people by volunteering again. New people that I never knew before. I knew them by name, but that was about it.
So you came here in 1942 and you've never left.
Never left.
You've
No.
loved the town since.
No, and my husband, when he was getting out of the service, said, well, we've got to think about it, because he had to serve 1.5 years after the wars were over, because he had enlisted for 3 more years, and therefore he had 5 years he had to serve. And he said, we've really got to think about it. Are we going to live in Sandwich, or are we going back to Long Island to live? We have to think about this. He said, you think about it. I did, and he did, and we both agreed. One day he came home. He was stationed in Maine before he got out of the service, and said, have you thought about where we're going to live? And I said, yes, I'd like to stay in Sandwich. He said, I already made that decision a long time ago. I was afraid I was going to have to force you to think more about living in Sandwich and commit yourself. And I said, you don't have to. And we both were very, very glad we made that decision. It was one of the best decisions we ever made, seriously.
Wonderful.
So.
Well, Mrs. Velsar, I really thank you for your time. It was very interesting to hear about Sandwich in the 1940s and during the World War II period particularly.
Right.
So thank you so much.
Well, thank you for asking me, and that I could remember a lot of this. I still, think about some of these things that happened while I was here in Sandwich during World War II especially.
Yeah. Well,
Yes.
you did great. You did great. So that's the end of our program.
Okay, good. Okay, thank you. Well, I hope I
You did great.
did all right, whatever.
You did great. Yeah,
Okay.
you can show that tape to the
Okay.
kids. We'll probably have that done in about a week's time.
Now, that's good to know. I didn't realize that you could do through your...
Through your computer,
Yeah. That's great.
Yeah. That is wonderful.
Now, have you enjoyed, we can talk now.
Sure, yeah.
Have you enjoyed making your decision to come to Sandwich?
Oh, it's been the best thing we ever did.
Good.
By far, the best thing we ever did. We, like you, we have made a lot of friends. We joined a group called the Newcomers Group
Yes,
down
all
here.
right, okay.
And we've met a lot of close friends since then. I was just at someone's house for dinner last night with 3 other couples, and the night before, someone else's house for cocktails. And so we have a large network of friends that we do kayaking and golfing and biking. I have a group of friends that I play golf with from down here. I have another group of friends that I play poker with. And then I met a whole other cast of people from my historic interests.
You're talking about playing poker. I can tell you when I'm thinking. My husband loved to play cards. I did not. My children learned from their dad. They loved poker. So whenever they were all home, they played poker. That was the fun thing. And they played for chips, not real money, but for chips, which was fine. Well, then my husband got a little older and he was working shifts over at Otis, at Civilian. And he said, Louise, would you mind if down in the basement, if I could get a card table and we could play, I could play poker down there? I have a group of men that I know would enjoy playing, that are friends of ours. I know their wives wouldn't, but I'm sure their husbands would. Would you mind if we played once a week?